Hi everyone. Welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. By all accounts, Lindsay Musgrove was a kind and caring person who graduated with a biology degree from Quinnipiac University in 2012. 2 years later, she earned her nursing license and studied at Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. Lindsay dedicated her life to helping others as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Lindsay quickly established herself as a consummate caregiver, and her colleagues loved to work with her. Known for her attention to detail and compassion, Lindsay's patients requested her as their preferred nurse for future deliveries. Her ability to soothe nervous parents and guide them through labor was remarkable. In 2016, Lindsay married Patrick Clancy, a computer software engineer. Just 1 year after their marriage, Lindsay and Patrick welcomed their daughter Cora. Cora was a loving and caring older sister who dreamed of becoming a doctor and a mommy. Dawson, their second child born in 2019, was a bright and charismatic boy. His laughter and infectious smile lit up every room he entered. In 2022, Lindsay gave birth to Callan. Callan was a happy and easygoing child. He was often referred to as Happy Callan by his mom and dad. Lindsay, Patrick, and their children lived in a beautiful house in Duxbury, Massachusetts. The house, purchased for $500,000, had everything they could have asked for. Their backyard was adorned with a white picket fence and a playground, creating the perfect setting for an American dream home. To their friends and family, Lindsay and Patrick had what many would consider a perfect marriage. The couple rarely fought, and their unwavering affection for each other was evident in the way they exchanged I love yous several times a day. They were the epitome of a loving couple radiating happiness and contentment. Patrick was a loving and dedicated father to Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Their bond was unbreakable. He was always in the backyard, engaging in playful activities with his 3 children. There was nothing more important to Lindsay than Cora, Dawson, and Callan. She loved being a mother and believed that raising children was the most rewarding and fulfilling thing a person could do with their life. Pictures of her children filled the walls of her home, and she constantly shared images of them on social media. She would write posts expressing her gratitude and joy, such as, "I feel like the luckiest mama in the world, and so unbelievably thankful for this family and life." Those who knew Lindsay attested to her dedication as a mother, describing her as someone who would leave parties early to return home to her babies. She truly hated hearing them cry, even when sleep training them. Lindsay's commitment to her children was evident in every aspect of her relationship. After the birth of Cora and Dawson, Lindsay's emotions became overwhelming. The weight of motherhood proved to be a significant challenge for her, and she struggled to navigate the complicated waters of motherhood. However, she declared on Facebook that her experience with motherhood with Callan was going more smoothly, as she was focused on exercise, nutrition, and rest. She was taking proactive steps to address her emotional well-being. However, as time went on, Lindsay started to experience anxiety about returning to work after her maternity leave. The pressure of being a full-time mother and balancing her career became overwhelming for her. She sought solace in various forms of therapy, including visits to multiple psychs and being prescribed a range of medications. By September 2022, Lindsay's anxiety levels had reached an all-time high. In search of relief, she decided to seek further help. She went for an evaluation at the Women and Infant Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence. Unfortunately, she was not diagnosed with postpartum depression during this visit. On January 1, 2023, she confessed to her husband Patrick that she had thoughts of harming herself and her children. Alarmed and concerned, Lindsay to seek help and admitted herself to the McLean Hospital for mental health treatment. She would spend the next 5 days in the hospital, receiving the necessary care. When Lindsay was discharged from McLean Hospital, the doctors determined that the young woman posed no danger to herself or others. However, no one knew the true extent of her struggles. Throughout January, Lindsay appeared to be getting better. Her family went on several outings to museums and restaurants, and Lindsay herself expressed that she no longer had thoughts of harming herself. Even her mother noticed a change in her text messages, as her tone appeared more upbeat. However, no one knew that Lindsay was battling her own demons beneath the surface. On January 24, 2023, those demons finally took a terrible toll. On this day, Lindsay's true thoughts and feelings came to light in the most devastating manner. January 23, 2023, began as a regular day for the Clancy family. As the morning progressed, Lindsay took the children to the doctor for a checkup. Her daughter, Cora, was scheduled for a routine examination with her pediatrician. Upon their return home, Lindsay spent quality time with her children, enjoying an afternoon of play in the snow. Taking the opportunity to capture these moments, she snapped a few pictures and shared them with her husband, Patrick, and her mother. The happy scene painted a seemingly normal picture of family life. On that fateful day, Patrick was working from home in the basement. Around 4 p.m., after Lindsay and the children came inside from playing in the snow, she Googled Kids Miralax. She also used Apple Maps to calculate how long it would take for someone to drive to the 3V restaurant near Kingston. Lindsay also searched the CVS website called the CVS in Kingston and asked if they had children Miralax. She then texted Patrick in the basement office and said, "Any chance you want to do takeout from the 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." Although 3V was a bit out of the way for Lindsay and Patrick to eat from, there were closer restaurants they had ordered from before. Patrick informed Lindsay that he agreed to check the menu and select what he wanted to eat. He chose the scallop and pork belly risotto, while Lindsay opted for the Mediterranean Power Bowl. At 5:10 p.m., Lindsay called the 3V to place the order and mentioned Patrick as the designated pickup person. At 5:15 p.m., Patrick left the home, and Lindsay sent him a text message as a reminder to pick up the children's medications at the CVS. CCTV footage showed that Patrick arrived at the CVS at 5:32 p.m. However, he did not receive an answer during his attempt to ask about the brand Lindsay preferred. 1 minute later, at 5:34 p.m., Lindsay finally returned Patrick's phone call, which lasted for 14 minutes. Although the conversation seemed normal, Patrick later shared that he sensed that Lindsay was in the midst of doing something while talking to him. It was chilly outside as Patrick arrived home at 6 p.m. after stopping to pick up dinner and medication at CVS. As Patrick pulled into his driveway and entered his home, he noticed an eerie silence that hung in the air. The usually bustling house was unusually quiet, and the absence of the family sounds of his 3 children and wife, Lindsay, was unsettling. Panic began to settle in Patrick's mind as he searched for any signs of life in his home. Lindsay and his children, Cora, Dawson, and Callan, were nowhere to be found. His heart raced with worry as he called Lindsay's cell phone at 6:09 p.m., hoping to hear her voice on the other end of the line. Unfortunately, there was no response. With growing concern, Patrick made his way up the stairs to the master bedroom. The silence was deafening, and each step he took echoed through the empty house. As he approached the door, he noticed it was locked, which was even more unsettling as Lindsay had never locked herself in the bedroom before. Patrick turned the knob, but it wouldn't budge. He exerted more force, but the stubborn lock refused to give way. Desperate to find his wife, Patrick resorted to pounding on the door, hoping to elicit a response. All he received in return was silence. Frustrated but determined, Patrick continued to struggle with the locked bedroom door. After what seemed like an eternity, he managed to force it open, revealing a scene that would be etched in his memory forever. Blood stained the floor and windowsill, and a bloody knife lay ominously on Lindsay's bedside table. The sight sent a shiver down Patrick's spine as he immediately recognized something unspeakable had happened inside the room. Walking toward the bloody windowsill, Patrick peered outside and saw his wife, Lindsay, lying on the ground in the backyard, his heart pounding with fear. Patrick frantically dialed 911 as he ran down the stairs and outside to Lindsay. Patrick found Lindsay lying face up in the backyard, her body soaked in blood. Slashes were visible on both her neck and wrists. Lindsay was conscious, but barely responsive. Panic washed over Patrick as he desperately tried to make sense of the situation. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. In an eerie and detached voice, Lindsay replied that she had attempted to take her own life and jumped out the window. As Patrick's mind raced, filled with confusion and concern for the welfare of their children, he had to ask the unthinkable. Where were the 3 young children? Lindsay coldly replied, "In the basement." Patrick remained outside with Lindsay until the police and paramedics arrived, staying on the phone with the 911 dispatcher the entire time. The dispatcher could hear the tension in Patrick's voice as he relayed the grim situation and stayed by his wife's side. The paramedics quickly arrived on the scene and began assessing Lindsay's condition. They worked tirelessly to stabilize her and provide any necessary medical attention. Meanwhile, Patrick's thoughts were consumed by the well-being of his children. With the paramedics preoccupied with Lindsay, Patrick decided to search for his children. While still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, Patrick walked back into their home, his heart pounding with fear. He descended the staircase into the basement where Lindsay had said their children were. With every step, he called out, "Guys," hoping that they would respond to him, but there was no response. As Patrick reached the bottom of the staircase, the atmosphere grew tense and foreboding. The silence was deafening and a sense of dread filled the air. Suddenly, the dispatcher on the end of the line heard a scream as if someone or something was in agony. Upon entering the basement, Patrick discovered his 3 children, Cora, Callan, and Dawson, lying unconscious on the floor. Each child had an exercise band tightly wrapped around their neck. As panic set in, Patrick immediately called for help. Patrick begged his children to wake up and breathe, his voice filled with desperation. He screamed for the police officers upstairs, assisting his wife, Lindsay. In a matter of minutes, the officers descended the stairs and witnessed a horrific sight. 3 innocent children, unconscious and unresponsive, lay lifeless on the cold floor. In the midst of the chaos and turmoil, Patrick uttered the words, "She killed the kids," referring to his wife, Lindsay. With each word, his desperation turned to anguish as he realized the extent of his wife's unimaginable act. Cora, his 5-year-old daughter, and Dawson, his 3-year-old son, were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Callan, just 7 months old, was still alive, but his injuries were severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, the infant succumbed to his injuries several days later in the hospital, with his father by his side, holding him in his arms as he took his final breaths. The tragic events that unfolded in less than 20 minutes had shattered Patrick's world, leaving him grief-stricken and desperate for answers. Lindsay, in the meantime, was taken to Boston's Children's Hospital to be treated for the injuries she sustained when she jumped out of the window and fell 20 feet in an attempt to take her own life. She was charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Days after the horrific events unfolded, Patrick Clancy expressed his feelings on a GoFundMe page created for him and his family. Despite the unimaginable pain and shock, he displayed love and forgiveness for his wife. However, he admitted that the shock and pain of the entire ordeal were relentless, leaving his family in a state of profound grief. The GoFundMe campaign, established to cover the expenses associated with Cora Dawson and Callum's funeral, received generous support from the public. However, many individuals expressed that they were effectively funding Lindsay's defense by contributing to the campaign. This statement sparked controversy and raised concerns about the potential misuse of funds. Lindsay's attorneys later clarified that their legal fees were not paid through the GoFundMe campaign. Instead, her parents were responsible for covering these expenses. Despite the controversy surrounding the GoFundMe campaign, it managed to raise over $1 million. However, as of this time, the campaign is no longer accepting donations as it reached its goal. During a brief hearing held on February 3, 2023, in Plymouth District Court, a judge granted a request by Lindsay's attorney for the police to waive security rules at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where Lindsay was a patient. The request was made to allow the examination of Lindsay by a forensic psychiatrist to access her for symptoms of postpartum depression. Lindsay's attorneys argued that her self-inflicted injuries had left her movement extremely limited, and she posed no threat to anyone. Lindsay's attorney further contended that Lindsay was subject to a horrific over-medication of prescription drugs. Among the medications listed by her attorney were Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, Zoloft, amitriptyline, mirtazapine, Prozac, mood stabilizers such as Lamictal and Seroquel, as well as buspirone, hydroxyzine, and Ambien. She had been prescribed a total of 13 medications within 4 months for the treatment of mood disorders, anxiety, and psychosis. According to Lindsay's attorneys, one of the side effects of over-medication on these drugs was suicidal and homicidal intentions. The attorney believed that a thorough examination by a forensic psychiatrist was necessary to determine the extent of her symptoms and the potential risks associated with her medication regimen. The Plymouth County prosecutor painted a vivid picture of her actions, alleging that she acted with extreme atrocity and cruelty, challenging the defense's assertion that her postpartum mental condition and prescription medication played a role in her homicidal acts. During the court proceedings, Lindsay sat silently in a hospital room, watching intently through a monitor. As the details of this tragic case unfolded in court, a not guilty plea was entered on behalf of Lindsay. When Lindsay Clancy committed the heinous act of murdering her 3 children, she committed filicide, the deliberate act of killing one's offspring. According to Dr. Philip Resnick, a psychiatrist who specializes in the area of filicide, there are 5 primary reasons why a parent would commit filicide. One surprising motive behind filicide is a sense of altruism. In some cases, parents may feel that by ending their child's life, they are sparing them suffering or preventing a tragic future. This motive is difficult to understand and comprehend, as it flies in the face of natural parental instincts to protect and nurture. Another potential reason for filicide is acute psychosis. With mental health disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, people may experience delusions or hallucinations that lead them to perceive their children as threats or sources of harm. In these cases, the person's perception of reality becomes distorted, and they may believe they are saving their child from harm. In some cases, parents may have second thoughts or regrets about having a child. They may harbor disappointment, frustration, or even hatred towards their children. This sentiment can escalate to the point where the parent feels compelled to take drastic measures to eliminate the child. Physical abuse can be a catalyst for filicide. When parents subject their children to severe or ongoing physical abuse, it can create a toxic environment where the child becomes the victim and the parent becomes the perpetrator. In the most severe cases, the parent may feel a sense of relief or release after physically harming their child, leading to the ultimate act of filicide. Filicide can also arise in the context of spousal revenge. In instances where one parent feels betrayed, abandoned, or abused by the other, they may turn their anger towards their child. By harming their child, they may seek revenge or exert control over their partner, demonstrating the depths of their despair and frustration. The shocking tragedy raised questions about the connection between postpartum depression, PPD, psychosis, and homicidal behavior. Lindsay's attorneys argued that a combination of postpartum psychosis and overmedication were to blame for her actions. After childbirth, the levels of hormones in a woman's body drop quickly, leading to chemical changes in the brain and mood swings. This natural process, known as the postpartum period, can cause feelings of overwhelm, loss of energy, intrusive thoughts of harming oneself or the baby, loss of sleep, and a variety of other physical and emotional challenges. However, postpartum psychosis is a far more severe and dangerous condition that affects the mother's sense of reality. This condition affects approximately 1 to 2 of every 1,000 deliveries, and is characterized by a sudden and severe loss of sanity. Symptoms may include delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, rapid mood swings, and disorganized thinking. During the investigation into the murder of Lindsay Clancy's 3 children, a diary entry was discovered on her phone dated October 25, 2022. This journal entry, written months before the heinous crime, revealed distressing insights into her state of mind in the days leading up to the killings. In the diary entry, Lindsay expressed frustration and resentment towards her children, specifically Cora and Dawson. Lindsay wrote that sometimes she resented them because they prevented her from treating their infant son Callan like her first child. She expressed her discontentment when Cora and Dawson returned from preschool, stating that their bad blood seemed to rub off on her. According to Lindsay, she felt depressed and her emotions were affecting her children. Additionally, the detectives discovered that just 4 days before the killings, Lindsay conducted a search on her phone that read, "Can you treat a sociopath?" She also looked up ways to kill on her mobile device. The revelation that Lindsay harbored resentment towards her children and sought information on how to carry out such a heinous crime was deeply disturbing. During an arraignment in October 2023, it was revealed during the arraignment that toxicology reports had revealed the presence of certain medications in Lindsay's system. The reports indicated that she had been prescribed antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and an anticonvulsant, all of which were found to have reached therapeutic levels. The prosecution's case focused on proving that Lindsay had premeditated the murders and carried out a deliberate act of violence. They argued that the presence of medication in her system played no role in her actions, as she had already made the decision to kill her children. Further, the timing and level of the medications further supported their theory that Lindsay had acted with a clear mind and without any impairment caused by medication. In 2024, Patrick Clancy completed the Boston Marathon in his children's names, raising funds for the Boston Children's Hospital. During this time, Lindsay, who is facing trial for the murder of her children, remains committed to her treatment at the Tewksbury Hospital. She is currently described as permanently paralyzed. Story 2. Finding love can often lead to unexpected paths, but for Sheila Davalloo, it became a dangerous obsession. As a talented pharmaceutical researcher, Sheila appeared to have a bright future ahead. However, her relationship took a dark turn when she became entangled in a love triangle with her coworker Nelson Sessler and his girlfriend Annalisa Raimondo. What started out as a harmless affair turned deadly and led to a murder. On November 8, 2002, at approximately 12:19 p.m., police received a frantic 911 call reporting a violent incident at the home of Annalisa Raimondo in Stamford, Connecticut. When officers arrived, they were met with a horrific scene. Annalisa's lifeless body lay near the entrance of her condo, brutally stabbed multiple times in a chaotic struggle. Sheila Davalloo was born on May 11, 1969, in Iran. In the mid-1970s, her family emigrated to the United States, seeking new opportunities. Sheila pursued her education at Stonebrook University, where she earned a degree in biochemistry. Following her graduation, she took a position as a research scientist at Purdue Pharma in Stamford, Connecticut. Her professional life flourished, but it would later intersect with personal turmoil that would have significant implications in her future. Sheila Davalloo married Farid Massavi, but their relationship deteriorated when Sheila began an affair with Paul Christos, a fellow graduate student she met while attending New York Medical College. The affair ultimately led to their divorce. After her marriage ended, Sheila started a new relationship with Nelson Seltzer while working at Purdue Pharma. This affair would become pivotal in the unfolding events surrounding Annalisa Raimondo, who was dating Nelson at the time of her murder. The dynamics of these relationships created a complex web of jealousy and rivalry that would later be scrutinized during the investigation into Annalisa's death. In the days leading up to November 8, 2002, tensions began to get high due to the complicated relationships involving Sheila Davalloo, Nelson Seltzer, and Annalisa Raimondo. Sheila was dating Nelson at the time, who was now in a relationship with Annalisa. Things between Nelson and Annalisa began to get serious. This left Sheila with nothing but jealousy and resentment against Lisa, who she saw as a romantic rival, and the hurdle between her and Nelson's relationship. On the morning of the murder, Annalisa was at her Stamford condo, unaware that her life was about to be tragically cut short. On November 8, 2002, Annalisa Raimondo was brutally attacked in her home. The assailant, later identified as Sheila Davalloo, entered the condo with clear intent. Evidence suggests that Sheila confronted Annalisa inside the residence. During the attack, Annalisa suffered multiple stab wounds, inflicted with a knife. The wounds were primarily located on her face, neck, and chest, indicating a violent struggle. The murder unfolded rapidly. Witnesses reported hearing screams coming from the condo. The chaotic nature of the attack suggested a personal motive rather than a random act of violence. After the stabbing, Sheila fled the scene, leaving Annalisa's body near the entrance of her home. The discovery of Annalisa's body came later that day when a neighbor visited her and found her unresponsive. The friend immediately called emergency services, reporting a possible homicide. Upon arrival, police found Annalisa deceased, surrounded by signs of a violent struggle that would lead them to launch an extensive investigation into her death. When police arrived at the scene, they found Annalisa, 32 years old, brutally beaten and stabbed to death inside her apartment, which had been ransacked. The absence of forced entry suggested that Annalisa likely knew her killer. Blood was found throughout the apartment, including the bathroom sink, indicating a frenzied attack. Following the discovery of the body, Nelson Seltzer was notified by the police about Annalisa's death and arrived at the scene. His calm demeanor raised suspicions among investigators. Police quickly began investigating his alibi. He was confirmed to be at work during the time of Annalisa's murder, supported by CCTV footage. During the investigation, witnesses reported seeing a man named Gary Riley near Annalisa's apartment on the day of the murder. However, after further questioning and examination of evidence, Gary was clear of any involvement. Despite these leads, investigators lacked sufficient evidence to charge anyone with the crime. The case remained open as they continued to gather information and analyze potential suspects. In March 2003, Sheila Davalloo stabbed her husband, Paul Christos, during what she later claimed was an accident while playing a game that involved handcuffs and blindfolds. On March 22nd, Sheila introduced Paul to a guessing game where he was restrained and unable to see. During this game, objects were touched against him, creating an atmosphere of playful intimacy. However, the situation escalated on March 23rd, when Sheila stabbed Paul twice with a paring knife inside their Pleasantville, New York condominium. After the initial stabbing, Sheila hesitated to call 911 for medical assistance. Eventually, she drove Paul to the hospital, but stopped in a secluded area behind the facility, where she attempted to stab him again. Paul was found in the hospital parking lot with multiple stab wounds. He underwent emergency surgery and survived the attack. Following the incident, Sheila was charged with attempted murder, while she maintained that the stabbings were accidental and a part of the game they were playing. After the stabbing of Paul Christos, police began to uncover inconsistencies between Sheila Davalloo's account of events and Paul's version. Sheila claimed that the incident was an accident during a game. However, investigators noted discrepancies in her statements that raised suspicions about her narrative. Further complicating matters, it was revealed that after stabbing Paul, Sheila had called Nelson Seltzer instead of contacting 911 for immediate medical assistance. This decision drew the attention of law enforcement, as it suggested a potential motive and connection to her previous relationship with Nelson. On February 19, 2004, Sheila was convicted of attempted murder against Paul Christos and sentenced to 25 years without parole at Bedford Hills Maximum Security Prison. Following Sheila's conviction for attempted murder, police revisited the unsolved case of Annalisa Raimondo. Public statements made by Annalisa's father, Dr. Renato Raimondo, played a significant role in refocusing the investigation on Sheila. He publicly expressed his belief that Sheila was responsible for his daughter's murder, stating, "I believe she is the one who killed my daughter." This assertion prompted investigators to examine the evidence from Lisa's case more closely. They began to connect the dots between Sheila's violent behavior towards Paul and her potential motive for Annalisa's murder, leading them to consider Sheila as the prime suspect in the earlier homicide. The investigation into both cases would ultimately reveal critical evidence linking Sheila to the murder of Annalisa Raimondo. Following Sheila Davalloo's conviction for the attempted murder of her husband, police began to link her case to the unsolved murder of Annalisa Raimondo. Investigators revisited the evidence from both cases, focusing on the timeline and relationships involved. The examination revealed that Sheila had been in a romantic relationship with Nelson Seltzer, who was dating Annalisa at the time of her murder. This connection raised questions about Sheila's motives and potential involvement in Annalisa's death. The investigation into attempted murder had already uncovered Sheila's violent tendencies, leading authorities to consider whether these behaviors extended to her actions towards Annalisa. As they pieced together the evidence, investigators found that Sheila's obsession with Nelson could have played a significant role in both incidents. This critical link prompted law enforcement to intensify their scrutiny of Sheila's past and her relationship dynamics. On November 6, 2007, nearly 5 years after Annalisa Raimondo's murder, Sheila Davalloo was arrested for the crime. At the time of her arrest, she was still serving her sentence for the attempted murder of Paul Christos. The circumstances surrounding her arrest involved a thorough investigation that connected her to Annalisa's death through DNA evidence and other forensic findings. As police compiled their case against Sheila, they presented compelling evidence that suggested she had the motive and opportunity to commit the murder. The arrest marked a significant turning point in the investigation, as it linked Sheila directly to a crime that had long remained unsolved. Law enforcement officials were now prepared to move forward with charges related to Annalisa Raimondo's murder, setting the stage for a high-profile trial in the years to come. In the lead-up to Sheila Davalloo's trial for the murder of Annalisa Raimondo, several pretrial motions were filed concerning the admissibility of evidence. One significant motion was related to uncharged misconduct stemming from Sheila's attempted murder of her then-husband Paul Christos. The prosecution sought to introduce this evidence to establish a pattern of behavior that would illuminate Sheila's motive and intent regarding the murder of Annalisa. The court ultimately ruled in favor of the prosecution, determining that the evidence was relevant and critical for understanding the context of Sheila's actions. The judge emphasized that while the evidence of uncharged misconduct could evoke strong emotions, it did not unduly prejudice the jury. The court noted that Sheila's manipulative behavior and her attempted murder of Christos were indicative of her obsessive nature, which was central to the prosecution's case. By allowing this evidence, the court aimed to provide jurors with a comprehensive view of Sheila's psychological state and motivations leading up to Annalisa's murder. This ruling set the stage for a trial focused on uncovering the complexities of Sheila's relationships and her potential motives for committing such a violent act. The trial of Sheila Davalloo was structured as a jury trial and lasted over 2 weeks. Sheila made the significant decision to represent herself, foregoing legal counsel in favor of direct control over her defense. This choice allowed her to confront witnesses and present her case in her own words, but it also placed the burden of navigating legal procedures and courtroom rules entirely on her shoulders. The prosecution presented a compelling case, arguing that Sheila Davalloo's motive for murdering Annalisa Raimondo stemmed from an obsessive desire to rekindle her relationship with Nelson Seltzer. They contended that Sheila's jealousy over Nelson's relationship with Annalisa drove her to commit the crime. The prosecution emphasized the emotional turmoil and rivalry that characterized the love triangle, painting a picture of a woman whose fixation on Seltzer led to drastic and violent actions. In their arguments, the prosecution described the murder as cold and calculated. They asserted that Sheila had planned the attack, highlighting the premeditated nature of her actions. This characterization was supported by evidence that suggested Sheila had been stalking Annalisa and plotting to eliminate her as her rival. By framing the murder in this way, the prosecution aimed to convey the jury that Sheila's actions were not impulsive, but rather the result of deliberate choice fueled by obsession. To further strengthen their case, the prosecution introduced unchanged misconduct evidence related to Sheila's attempted murder of Paul Christos, her then-husband. This evidence illustrated a pattern of behavior that was critical in establishing Sheila's motive and intent. The court had already ruled this evidence to be relevant to understanding Sheila's psychological state and her propensity for violence, thereby allowing the jury to see a broader context for her actions. The prosecution argued that these incidents were not isolated, but part of a larger pattern of manipulative and dangerous behavior. They posited that Sheila's history of violence against Christos indicated a willingness to resort to extreme measures when faced with emotional challenges or perceived threats to her desires. This pattern was essential in demonstrating how deeply ingrained Sheila's obsession with Seltzer was, and how it ultimately culminated in Annalisa's murder. Overall, the prosecution's arguments were structured to create a narrative of obsession, manipulation, and premeditated violence, aiming to convince the jury of Sheila's guilt in the first-degree murder of Annalisa Raimondo. To back up their claims, the prosecution had a key piece of evidence. First up, The prosecution presented compelling forensic evidence that Sheila's DNA was found on a sink handle in Annalisa's apartment. This critical piece of evidence established a direct link between Sheila and the crime scene, suggesting that she had been present during the murder. The forensic analysis indicated that the DNA was consistent with Sheila's profile, which became a focal point for the prosecution's argument. The next piece of evidence presented by the prosecution was an analysis of the 911 call made on the 8th of November 2002, after Annalisa's murder. A voice recognition expert testified that Sheila was the caller who alerted police to Annalisa's home. The analyst indicated a 68% accuracy match between Sheila's voice and the caller, which the prosecution argued was significant enough to support their case. This evidence suggested that Sheila may have been trying to deflect suspicion away from herself by luring authorities to the scene. Apart from two key pieces of evidence, the state prosecutors also had a couple of testimonies lined up against Sheila Davalloo. First up was Paul Christos. He provided testimony about his troubling marriage with Sheila, detailing violent incidents, including his own stabbing at her hands during a game involving handcuffs and a blindfold, for which Sheila was already serving a 25-year sentence. His testimony highlighted Sheila's capacity for violence and manipulation, painting a picture of a woman who resorted to extreme measures when faced with emotional turmoil. Next up to the witness box was the man for whom the entire tragedy seemed to have taken place. Nelson Seltzer testified about his relationship with both women, explaining how he became serious with Annalisa while distancing himself from Sheila. His insights into his interactions with Sheila revealed her obsessive tendencies and provided context for the rivalry that led to Annalisa's murder. Sheila Davalloo chose to represent herself during her trial, a decision that allowed her to directly confront witnesses and control the defense. This choice was significant as it meant she would have to navigate the complexities of legal procedures and courtroom decorum without the guidance of an attorney. Sheila's self-representation was a strategic move aimed at asserting her autonomy in the proceedings, but it also placed considerable pressure on her to effectively argue her case against experienced prosecutors. The defense focused on challenging the prosecution's evidence and creating a reasonable doubt regarding Sheila's guilt. One of their primary strategies was to question the reliability of the DNA evidence presented by the prosecution. Sheila argued that while her DNA was found on the sink handle, there were numerous ways it could have been contaminated or left there without her being present during the murder, suggesting that the presence of her DNA did not definitely prove she was involved in Annalisa's death. Additionally, Sheila targeted the voice recognition analysis that linked her to the 911 call. She pointed out that the match was only 68% accurate, stating, "They say Harry Connick Jr. and Frank Sinatra sound alike," attempting to cast doubt on the validity of this evidence. Sheila emphasized that without clear identification or stronger forensic evidence directly tying her to the act of murder, there remained significant uncertainty about her culpability. Furthermore, Sheila introduced alternative suspects based on evidence found at the crime scene. She highlighted a blue contact lens discovered in Annalisa's hair, arguing that it indicated someone else could have been involved in the murder. Sheila also referenced witnesses who claimed to have seen a man and a woman arguing outside Annalisa's apartment around the time of the murder, suggesting that these individuals should be considered as potential suspects. During cross-examinations, Sheila focused on questioning Paul Christos and Nelson Seltzer to identify inconsistencies in their testimonies. She aimed to undermine their credibility and highlight any contradictions that could support her defense. First up was Paul's turn. During his testimony, Sheila confronted Paul about his account of their marriage and his stabbing incident. At one point, when asked by prosecutors to reveal his scars from the stabbing, Sheila broke down emotionally in court, but later attempted to deflect by making a joke about her emotional response. Sheila sought to establish that Paul had previously described their relationship as nonviolent and loving before the stabbing incident, which she argued contradicted his portrayal of her as a violent person. Then it was Nelson Seltzer's turn for the cross-questioning examination. In cross-examining Seltzer, Sheila attempted to extract details about his relationship with Annalisa and how it developed after their affair ended. She questioned him about his commitment to Annalisa and whether he had ever expressed doubts about their relationship. Sheila aimed to portray Seltzer as someone who may have had motives or reasons for wanting Annalisa out of the picture, thus diverting suspicion away from herself. Throughout these cross-examinations, Sheila had one motive: to create considerable doubt in the jury's mind regarding both witness reliability and the prosecution's narrative. By emphasizing inconsistencies and introducing alternative theories, she aimed to present herself not as a murderer, but as a victim of circumstances caught in a complex web of relationships. After the conclusion of the trial, the jury began their deliberations, which lasted a day and a half following the closing arguments from both prosecution and defense. During this time, jurors focused intently on the DNA evidence presented by the prosecution, as well as its implications for Sheila Davila's guilt. The presence of Sheila's DNA on the sink handle in Annalisa Raimondo's apartment was a critical point of discussion among jurors, who weighed its significance against the defense's claims of contamination and alternative explanations. The jury also considered the voice recognition analysis that linked Sheila to the 911 call made on the day of Annalisa's murder. Although Sheila's defense attempted to undermine this evidence by arguing its reliability, jurors were tasked with determining whether the prosecution had established a strong enough case to provide Sheila's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. On February 10, 2012, the jury reached their verdict. After deliberating for a day and a half, they found Sheila Davila guilty on first-degree murder of the death of Annalisa Raimondo. The account was met with a mix of emotions in the courtroom, particularly from Annalisa's family, who had attended every day of the trial. The verdict marked a significant moment in the case that had drawn considerable public attention and highlighted complex issues surrounding obsession and violence. The conviction set the stage for sentencing proceedings, where Sheila faced potential penalties ranging from 25 to 60 years in prison for her crime. The jury's decision underscored their belief that the evidence presented by the prosecution had convincingly demonstrated Sheila's guilt in this tragic case. The sentencing hearing for Sheila Davila took place on April 27, 2012, presided over by Judge Richard Comerford. This hearing followed the jury's guilty verdict for first-degree murder, marking a critical point in the legal proceedings. The courtroom was filled with family members and supporters, all awaiting the judge's decision regarding Sheila's fate. During the sentencing phase, the prosecutor made a compelling case for a maximum sentence based on the nature of the crime. They argued that the murder was not only premeditated, but also executed in a particularly brutal manner, emphasizing the violent struggle Annalisa endured before her death. The prosecution sought to convey the severity of Sheila's actions and the need for a sentence that reflected the gravity of taking another person's life. In contrast, the defense argued for a lighter sentence, citing Sheila's mental health issues as a mitigating factor. They presented her troubling background and emotional struggles, suggesting that these factors contributed to her actions. The defense maintained that while Sheila's behavior was unacceptable, it stemmed from deep psychological issues rather than pure malice. Judge Comerford ultimately sentenced Sheila to 50 years in prison for first-degree murder. He noted that this sentence would effectively keep her incarcerated for life, especially given her age at sentencing, 42 years old. When combined with her previous 25-year sentence for attempted murder in New York, her total time in prison amounted to 75 years. The judge emphasized the cold and calculated nature of the murder during his ruling, referencing the emotional impact on Annalisa's family and the community. The trial of Sheila Davila attracted significant media coverage, largely due to the dramatic nature of the case and the complex relationships involved. The public's interest was heightened by the sensational aspects of the love triangle and violent crime that unfolded. Following her sentencing, Sheila expressed her intention to appeal the conviction. She believed there were grounds for contesting various aspects of the trial, including the admissibility of evidence and her decision to represent herself. However, the court denied her motion for a temporary stay at execution during her appeal preparations, meaning she would begin serving her sentence immediately. The story of Sheila Davila was a tragic tale of love turned to obsession and a mentally unstable individual not being able to regulate their emotions and resorting to violent actions of such a severe nature. What do you think could have been done differently to prevent such a tragic outcome? Do you think the jury made a mistake by not taking into account her mental health issues at the time of sentencing? Regardless of her mental health issues, she did commit 2 severe crimes for which she was rightfully sentenced. Sheila Davila is charged and guilty of attempted murder of Paul Christos, convicted in 2004, for which she currently serves a 25-year sentence at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women. First-degree murder of Annalisa Raimondo, convicted on February 10, 2012, for which she is serving a 50-year sentence, combining to make a total of 75 years, effectively ensuring she remains incarcerated for life due to her age at sentencing being 42 years. Story 3. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and throughout his life he touched the lives of those around him. Growing up, Eric was passionate about playing sports. He was actively involved in basketball, baseball, and soccer, showcasing his talent and love for staying active. His favorite activity was anything that involved being outdoors, and he excelled at hunting. Eric had a keen eye and an exceptional marksman, with trophy animals from all around the world adorning his wall. Known for his vibrant personality, Eric was someone who always brought joy and laughter into every room he entered. He had a genuine ability to entertain and make people smile, whether it was through storytelling, playing practical jokes, or his infectious laughter. Eric was the life of the party. Living in Utah, Eric owned every motorized toy possible, from trucks to four-wheelers and snowmobiles. He thoroughly enjoyed exploring the outdoors and experiencing the thrill of adventure. Despite his love for having fun, Eric took his faith very seriously. He was a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With the support of his family, Eric embarked on a mission trip to Mexico City, where he spent 2 years serving and learning Spanish fluently. After graduating high school, Eric continued his education at the University of Utah. He earned a bachelor's degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish. In 2009, Eric crossed paths with Corey Darden at Home Depot, where she worked. Eric, who frequented the store due to his work in construction, developed a friendly relationship with Corey over time. He found himself drawn to her charm and beauty, but was too nervous to approach her directly. Instead, Eric enlisted the help of a friend to gather her contact information on his behalf. One day, while shopping at Home Depot, Eric's friend approached Corey and discreetly requested her phone number, mentioning Eric's interest in getting to know her better. Grateful for his friend's assistance, Eric eagerly awaited the outcome. The next move was up to Eric. He mustered his courage and made the call to Corey, arranging their first face-to-face meeting. Little did he know that this meeting would forever change the course of his life. From the moment they met, Eric and Corey hit it off instantly. Their connection was undeniable, and their first date proved to be the beginning of a beautiful love story. As they introduced one another to their respective families, the bond between them grew even stronger. Corey's mother and brothers instantly embraced Eric, while Eric's family was equally impressed by Corey's character and compatibility with him. Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially protective of him, but they quickly warmed up to Corey and welcomed her into their family. In 2013, Eric and Corey made things official by getting married in an intimate ceremony. After their wedding, Corey gave birth to the couple's first child, Carter. Their family expanded with the arrival of Ashton, followed by Weston, completing the picture of their perfect little family. Fatherhood came easy to Eric, and his boys idolized him. Eric was proud of everything his sons did. Whether it was their academic achievements, sports victories, or artistic endeavors, Eric was always there to cheer them on and celebrate their accomplishments. Eventually, Eric started a stone masonry business and had a lot of success. His craftsmanship and attention to detail were unparalleled, and clients flocked to him for his expertise in creating exquisite stonework. The business thrived, providing financial stability for Eric and his family. Corey worked in real estate and she brought in money too. Her entrepreneurial spirit and knowledge of the local market made her a valuable asset to their growing family. She would purchase homes, flip them, and sell them for a profit. The Richins family had wealth. Their lifestyle was the epitome of success. On the surface, the Richins family appeared to have it all. However, this facade of perfection shattered on March 4, 2002, when Corey called 911, reporting that her husband, Eric, was unresponsive. When the paramedics arrived at the scene, they determined that Eric was already deceased. Corey, devastated by the news, called her mother, Lisa, who immediately rushed to be by her side. Her brothers, DJ and Ronnie, were also there, joining in their tears and disbelief. They all couldn't believe that Eric was gone. According to Corey, the night started peacefully. To celebrate the purchase of a mansion as part of her real estate business, she prepared Eric a drink before bed. It was a Moscow Mule made with ginger beer and vodka. Corey said she went to bed around 9 p.m., but lay down with her 9-year-old son in his room. The boy had nightmares, so Corey decided to sleep with him that night. However, around 3 a.m., Corey returned to her and Eric's bedroom. As she touched Eric, she felt that he was ice cold. She tried to wake him, but when he didn't respond, she knew something was wrong. As she waited for the paramedics to arrive, Corey recalled the dispatcher instructing her to perform CPR on Eric. Corey claimed she followed these instructions. The paramedics, lacking any clear indication of what caused Eric's death, speculated that it might have been an aneurysm. After all, Eric was a seemingly healthy 39-year-old with no known medical conditions. Upon further investigation, it was learned that the night before his death, Eric had complained to his wife, Corey, about chest pains. Corey's statement development further fueled suspicions of an aneurysm. Eric's autopsy results came as a shock to everyone involved in the case. His cause of death was determined to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a powerful pain medication that, when taken in excessive amounts, can be extremely dangerous and even fatal. The investigators were left with a crucial question. How had this substance found its way into Eric's system? From the moment of Eric's death, Corey and her family were quick to point fingers at his recreational drug use to explain why fentanyl was in his system. According to Corey, Eric would take a nightly THC gummy as a relaxation aid at the end of a long day. THC, the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, was his favorite method of unwinding. However, Corey, her mother, and brothers expressed concerns about the source of these gummies. They believed that Eric did not always obtain them from reputable suppliers and instead would purchase them off the street. Eric's mother-in-law, Lisa, was particularly troubled by this possibility. Due to Eric's history of recreational drug use, she wondered if he had also purchased pain pills from the streets, unknowingly putting himself at risk. However, Eric's family fiercely denied these allegations. They believed that something else was at play and urged investigators to explore alternative possibilities. Corey did her best to move on with her life, but according to her brother, Ronnie, she faced immense challenges. The absence of their husband and father left a void in their lives, and their 3 sons lashed out at the uncertainty surrounding his passing. In an effort to cope with her grief and provide comfort to her children, Corey made the decision to channel her emotions into a creative outlet. She self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me? On Amazon. The book aimed to help children understand and cope with the loss of a loved one. Corey's book told the story of a young boy who misses his deceased father. Through illustrations and storytelling, Corey depicted the character of Eric as an angel, always present and watchful over his son. Lisa, Corey's mother, expressed her approval of the book, stating that it brought her daughter and grandchildren a measure of solace. It allowed them to express their emotions. While Corey struggled to rebuild her life, detectives began investigating Eric's death. Their investigation led them to believe that foul play was involved. Within weeks of Corey's appearance on local Utah news stations promoting her book and discussing her journey through grief, she was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023. The charges against Corey sent shockwaves through the community, as everyone tried to make sense of the tragic turn of events. This once promising story of a grieving wife and her endeavor to help children cope with loss transformed into an unimaginable tale of tragedy and betrayal. According to court documents, Corey committed homicide through the administration of a poison. The spokesperson for Eric's family is adamant that they think Corey intentionally put a lethal dose of fentanyl into the Moscow Mule she made for him the night he died. However, Corey's attorney has asserted that no fentanyl was found in the glassware at their home. Corey has denied any involvement in Eric's death, claiming that she had no motive to harm him. Lisa, Corey's mother, expressed shock and disbelief at the news of her daughter's alleged involvement in his death. She assured investigators that the couple was content and that there was no reason for Corey to kill him. However, during the course of the investigation, detectives discovered that the relationship between Corey and Eric was not as idyllic as they portrayed to the outside world. The couple had differences, and Corey, who was a stay-at-home mom for several years, longed to be independent. Additionally, Corey was becoming increasingly irritated by Eric's frequent hunting trips. According to Lisa, there was infidelity in the marriage on Eric's part, and he and Corey had confided in her about the affair. Eric and Corey decided to seek counseling in an attempt to work through their problems, but Eric's family denies he ever cheated on her. Their decision to go to marriage counseling was driven by Eric's genuine love for his sons and his desire to make the marriage work. Despite his efforts to save the marriage, Eric had begun contemplating the consequences of a potential divorce. As a result, he took steps to protect his assets. He discreetly set up a secret trust with his sister, Katie, without revealing his intentions. One of the key pieces of evidence discovered during the investigation was the existence of 6 life insurance policies on Eric, with a total value of $3 million. 2 months before Eric's death, Corey had also forged his signature on an additional policy worth $100,000. Additionally, it was discovered that Corey had allegedly stolen money from Eric's personal accounts and misused funds from his business, dating back several years. According to a representative for Eric's family, Corey's house-flipping business was not doing well, contrary to what she had claimed. In fact, it was millions of dollars in debt. The spokesperson alleged that Corey needed money in a hurry. They further stated that in a signed premarital agreement, Corey had given up any claim to the business assets, but if Eric were to die before she did while they were married, she would receive the assets. Corey's attorney disputed these allegations, stating that her business was not in debt. They explained that taking debt for lines of credit was how the home's business operated, and when the houses were sold, the debt would be repaid. Corey's attorney emphasized that the large number alleged by the spokesperson was merely a reflection of business transactions. Lisa, Corey's mother, said that Eric had been supportive in Corey's business ventures, particularly when it came to purchasing the mansion they were celebrating the night he died. The mansion in question was located on a 10-acre estate in Heber Valley, in close proximity to major ski resorts in the area and Deer Creek Reservoir. This prime location offered a wide range of recreational activities. The mansion had been built back in 2017, but it remained abandoned until Corey discovered it. She financed the purchase through a group of investors, pooling their resources to make a generous offer on the mansion. Her plan was to develop it and transform it into a recreational hotspot. Corey's ultimate goal was to sell the completed property at a profit. Corey and Eric met with an accountant who calculated that the sale of the property could potentially generate a profit of $12 million. This amount represented a significant turnaround, as Corey had initially purchased the mansion for $3 million. By all accounts, Eric was on board with the purchase. However, Eric's family had differing memories. They contended that Eric was in fact against his wife buying the mansion, and had fought with her about it. The spokesperson for Eric's family believes that the night he died, Corey gave him a drink laced with fentanyl. Additionally, they alleged that this incident was not the first time Corey attempted to kill Eric. According to Eric's family, in 2019, when Corey, Eric, and their friends were in Greece, Eric became violently ill after Corey gave him a drink. However, Ronnie, Corey's brother, denied these allegations, stating that his sister did not try to murder Eric. Ronnie explained that at the time of the trip, Eric was on antibiotics and was told not to consume alcohol. However, the bartender accidentally prepared a drink with liquor instead of the virgin that Eric had requested. Eric's family alleges that the second time Corey tried to murder Eric was on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before his death. On this day, Corey brought Eric a sandwich, and after taking a bite, Eric broke out in hives and had trouble breathing. According to Eric's family, they also questioned her behavior following Eric's death. The court documents stated that 2 days after Eric's death, Corey punched his sister Amy in the neck and face when she tried to open a safe containing between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. However, Corey claimed that she was defending herself, as she was attempting to retrieve important documents from the safe. 1 month after the incident, Corey was charged with assault. She ultimately pleaded no contest to the charges. In June 2023, Corey appeared in court for a bail hearing. The hearing lasted for 4 hours, as Corey sat handcuffed next to her attorney as they attempted to convince the judge why she should be released on bail. Prosecutors introduced 3 witnesses and evidence to make their case that Corey had poisoned her husband. The state called a cell phone expert to the stand, and the expert was asked about Google searches found on Corey's phone that included topics such as, can deleted text messages be retrieved from an iPhone? Can FBI find deleted messages? And what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? However, Corey's attorney argued that those searches were conducted after Eric died, as Corey sought answers since she was being accused of murdering her husband. Prosecutors also contacted the lead detective involved in the case and questioned him about any potential sources that Corey could have used to obtain the drugs that were used to kill Eric. According to the detective, a woman named Carmen Lauber, who claimed to be a cleaner for Corey's business and home, told investigators about a meeting that took place in early 2022. During the call, Corey asked Carmen to procure fentanyl on behalf of an investor who had a back injury. Carmen, who had a criminal history involving drugs and was on probation for drug distribution charges when she was interviewed by the detectives, agreed to the request. She stated that she purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and later met with Corey to exchange the pills for cash on February 11, 2022. This exchange occurred approximately 3 days before Valentine's Day, which is when court documents indicate that Corey reportedly attempted to poison Eric with a sandwich. During the investigation, Carmen informed the detective that Corey contacted her again, expressing a desire for more potent drugs. This time, Carmen disclosed that Corey paid for the pills with a check. She stated that a week after Eric's death, Corey wrote a check to Carmen for $1,300. However, Corey's attorney disputed these allegations and questioned whether it was possible to interpret the amount as payment for cleaning services. The detective admitted that such a scenario was conceivable. Additionally, Corey's attorney attempted to undermine Carmen's credibility by highlighting her status as a convicted felon on probation for 4 first-degree felonies. The attorney argued that Carmen's criminal history made her an unreliable witness. They suggested that Carmen may have been pressured to admit to selling the drugs, claiming that the detective had told her she faced a considerable amount of time in prison if she did not participate in the investigation. Corey's attorney inquired if there was any physical evidence indicating that Carmen had actually purchased the drugs. The detective divulged that there were no text messages found where Corey explicitly asked Carmen for drugs. Furthermore, no witnesses were able to corroborate that they had witnessed Carmen and Corey's exchange drugs. At the bail hearing, Eric's sister addressed the judge and expressed her concerns about her brother's death. She stated that the family had been deeply tormented by the horrific circumstances that led to Eric's passing, and they did not want Corey to subject them to further torment by being released on bail. Eric's sister implored the judge to maintain Corey's custody, and the judge agreed. Corey's family, on the other hand, was disappointed that she was being denied bail and would remain in jail awaiting trial. They argued that Corey's time behind bars had taken a toll on her mentally and physically. In 2023, Corey experienced a medical emergency while taking medication prescribed by jail officials. She had a seizure and was rushed to the hospital from the jail premises. Corey alleged that jail officials had given her the wrong medication, causing her to experience adverse effects. Fortunately, she recovered from this incident after being treated at the hospital. However, while Corey was away at the hospital, jail officials discovered a handwritten letter in her cell that was never to anyone. The letter was filed into court records and presented by the state as a note written by Corey to her mother. Prosecutors argued that this document provided further proof of Corey's intentions and motivations for her actions. In November 2023, prosecutors filed a motion with the court seeking a no-contact order to restrict Corey's access to her mother and brothers. The request was primarily due to the letter that had been found in Corey's cell, which the prosecutors said was evidence of witness tampering. Prosecutors alleged that in the letter, Corey provided her mother with specific instructions on how her brother Ronnie should present himself in court. Corey allegedly wanted Ronnie to establish that Eric obtained drugs while traveling abroad in Mexico. Specifically, the letter stated that Corey believed that Ronnie should testify that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico. Additionally, Corey instructed Ronnie to obtain text messages from Eric discussing his use of drugs. Corey emphasized the importance of creating a connection between Eric's activities in Mexico and his alleged involvement in drugs. Corey adamantly denied the letter was witness tampering. According to Corey, the letter was nothing but a fictional creation. She said she wrote it as a fantasy story. The judge denied the motion for no contact, stating that the state failed to prove witness tampering. Corey and Eric's family are now seeking custody of their 3 sons, who are currently living with one of Eric's relatives. However, the boys have regular contact with their mother, Corey, through video calls twice a week from jail. Corey's family has not been granted private visits with the children, but they attend all of their sports events and practices as they are held in public places. If Corey is convicted of murdering her husband Eric by posting him with fentanyl in his drink, she faces a sentence of 25 years to life. Additionally, there are several civil cases filed against Corey regarding Eric's estate. Eric's family believes that Corey's family does not really care about the boys, and vice versa, as whoever gains custody of the children stands to gain control of Eric's money. Corey's trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. Story 4. Ryan Poston was born to Lisa and Jay Poston on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Throughout his life, Ryan enjoyed a strong and loving relationship with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Growing up, Ryan had the privilege of traveling the world and attending schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. In addition to his adventurous spirit, Ryan was known for his exceptional looks. His captivating features and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After graduating high school, Ryan continued his educational journey at Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. He excelled in his studies and graduated with honors in 2005. Driven to follow in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Sam and Pete Chase College of Law in Northern Kentucky University. With a deep admiration for the legal profession, Ryan followed in the footsteps of his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys. Ryan Poston was a young man with big aspirations. One of his biggest dreams was to own a successful law firm. However, in the meantime, he worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated his time and energy to representing individuals who could not afford to hire more expensive attorneys. Despite his young age, Ryan had already gained a significant following. Many people sought his counsel and guidance. He worked tirelessly to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of financial circumstances. In 2011, after a heart-wrenching breakup, Ryan sought solace and support from his Carissa. During this period, he frequently traveled to Lexington, Kentucky, to spend time with her. During one of those trips, his life took an unexpected turn. While in Lexington, Ryan met Shauna Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shauna Hubers was the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her outgoing personality and ability to make friends effortlessly. She possessed a contagious warmth and charm that drew people towards her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she pursued her higher education at the University of Kentucky, where she majored in psychology. Then, she moved on to Eastern Kentucky University, where she pursued her master's degree in psychology. Despite their age difference, Ryan was 29 and Shauna was just 21. Their feelings for each other were undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself spending more and more time with Shauna. The more time they spent together, the deeper their bond grew. Shauna found herself spending more and more time in Highland Heights, the suburb in Kentucky where Ryan resided. Each weekend, Shauna packed a bag and made the journey to Ryan's home. There, she devoted herself to taking care of him, cooking for him, and cleaning his space. As time passed, their relationship progressed and Ryan took Shauna to meet his parents. To her friends, Shauna couldn't contain her excitement. She gushed about Ryan, declaring her desire to be Mrs. Ryan Poston. However, Ryan and Shauna's bright future fell apart on October 12, 2012. Shauna told the dispatcher that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared painted a tragic picture of a domestic violence incident that had spiraled out of control. Shauna claimed that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she tried to retrieve her belongings. Shauna informed the 911 dispatcher that her boyfriend, Ryan, confronted her with a gun, and a physical altercation ensued. During the altercation, Shauna managed to gain possession of the firearm. However, she was intimidated by Ryan's size, and out of panic, Shauna pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. According to Shauna, she knew that Ryan was going to die anyway, so she wanted to put him out of his misery. Shauna explained to the 911 dispatcher because Ryan seemed to be suffering and making funny noises, she shot him several more times. She further divulged to the dispatcher that she placed the gun on a bookshelf after the incident. Minutes after Shauna called 911 and reported that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, the officers instructed Shauna to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite her initial hesitation, Shauna complied with the officers' orders. As she walked out of the apartment, the officers instructed her to lie face down on the ground. While Shauna followed the officers' instructions, it was evident that she was very upset. After the officers handcuffed Shauna and placed her in the back of their patrol vehicle, they made entry into the apartment and discovered Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived at the apartment and observed Ryan's condo, which appeared slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. It was discovered that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons. The gun Shauna used to shoot Ryan was his Sig Sauer semi-automatic. Based on the evidence gathered at the apartment, the investigators determined that Ryan was seated at the table when Shauna opened fire. They knew this due to the presence of blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were undisturbed raised doubts regarding Shauna's version of events. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators meticulously combed through Ryan's apartment. Simultaneously, officers canvassed the apartment complex, hoping to gather additional information from Ryan's neighbors. One neighbor, a woman named Nikki, offered valuable information to the detective. Nikki stated that she knew Shauna quite well and believed that Shauna's dedication to Ryan was not reciprocated. According to Nikki, the couple frequently engaged in heated arguments, often disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. Several months ago, Nikki recalled an incident where Shauna appeared at her door in tears, expressing her fear of Ryan. Shauna had informed Nikki that her altercation with Ryan had turned violent, claiming that he had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, resulting in injuries. Nikki believed Shauna's account, stating that she encouraged Shauna to report the abuse to the police. However, Shauna opted not to pursue legal action. At the police station, detectives brought Shauna into an interrogation room to interview her regarding her involvement in shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. Before proceeding with the questioning, the officers read Shauna her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shauna exercised this right and requested the presence of an attorney. As she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite the request for an attorney, Shauna chose to engage in conversation with the detective. When asked for the name of her victim, Shauna replied, "The man I killed." This response displayed a certain coldness and detachment, as it was clear that she knew the identity of her victim, which was Ryan, her longtime boyfriend. Shauna continued to talk to the detectives in the interrogation room. She expressed her belief that she had acted in self-defense, stating that Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment like a rag doll. She described the entire night as a surreal and out-of-body experience. At a certain point in the investigation, the detectives stepped out of the interrogation room while another officer took their place. Shauna began sharing new details with this officer regarding her encounter with Ryan. She claimed that prior to shooting him, he had said mean and nasty things to Shauna, calling her crazy and taunting her while holding a gun. According to Shauna, Ryan's behavior that night was extremely violent, which she believed was a result of him being under the influence of drugs. Throughout the interview, Shauna maintained her account of the events that led to the shooting and stated that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table playing with ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol. Shauna noticed him glaring at her from across the table. At that moment, according to Shauna, she realized his intentions and knew he was kicking her out of his condo. She admitted to picking up the gun and shooting Ryan. Amidst the chaos, Shauna fired one shot, striking Ryan. Shauna's account of the incident continued, alleging that after shooting Ryan once, she noticed him twitching. Believing that it was necessary to put him out of his misery, she fired several more times, ultimately killing him. During her confession, Shauna revealed to the detective that Ryan was vain. He claimed he expressed a desire for a nose job, so she took it upon herself to grant him that wish. Shauna intentionally aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, resulting in him receiving the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the dramatic interrogation, Shauna expressed deep concerns about her schoolwork and the damage a dead boyfriend would do to her love life. She confided that no one would want to marry her when they discovered she had murdered her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective, having listened to her statement, eventually arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shauna seemed genuinely shocked that she had been taken into custody, as she was adamant that she had shot him in self-defense. In 2015, Shauna's trial began, and the courtroom was shrouded in anticipation. The prosecutor presented their opening argument, comparing Shauna to the infamous Jodi Arias. Jodi Arias, like Shauna, had been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, and the two cases were eerily similar. This comparison only heightened the tension in the courtroom, as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor contended that Shauna was obsessed with Ryan, her ex-boyfriend. According to the prosecution, Ryan consumed Shauna's thoughts. All she ever talked about was him. During the trial, the prosecutor said Ryan's friends painted a picture of his intentions. They claimed that Ryan was planning to end his relationship with Shauna and was actively avoiding her phone calls and text messages. Despite this, Shauna would still show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. On the night of the murder, the state presented evidence to the jury that Ryan had a date lined up with Audrey Bolt, Miss Ohio, in 2012. This information added fuel to the prosecution's theory that Shauna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she and Ryan were supposed to meet for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder. She arrived at the bar and patiently waited for Ryan, but he never came. It was not until later that she learned that he had been shot and killed. During Shauna's trial, the prosecution presented evidence to the jury that showed that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shauna. A few days before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, seeking advice on how to handle the situation. Jay testified that he had told Ryan to be nice to Shauna in order to avoid an ugly breakup. However, despite these attempts to defuse the situation, it appears that Shauna continued to manipulate Ryan. On the day that Ryan was killed, the prosecution presented evidence showing that he spent a significant amount of time exchanging texts with Shauna. In these texts, Ryan explicitly informed her that he did not want to see her that weekend as he had other things to do. Despite this, Shauna showed up at his condo uninvited, as she often did. According to the prosecution, at some point during the argument, Ryan firmly stated that it was over and that Shauna could no longer manipulate him. The prosecutor said this seemed to infuriate Shauna, who, out of rage, picked up the gun and fatally shot Ryan. During Shauna's murder trial, the prosecution played the interrogation video in order to present evidence to the jury suggesting that she was a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shauna's demeanor and responses appeared to support the theory that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed Shauna dancing around the room and singing along to music, seemingly disregarding the gravity of the situation. This behavior seemed unusual for someone who had just killed the person they loved in self-defense. Most people in a similar situation would likely be in tears, devastated by the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's strategy in playing the interrogation video was to portray Shauna as detached and unemotional, suggesting that her actions were not those of someone who had killed in self-defense. They argued that her lack of tears and her carefree behavior were indicative of her guilty conscience. However, it is important to note that this interpretation was subjective and open to interpretation by the jury. Ultimately, the interrogation video played a crucial role in the prosecution's case against Shauna. Still, it was only one piece of evidence to consider alongside other evidence presented during the trial. Shauna's defense attorneys maintained a consistent narrative throughout her trial, asserting that Ryan was the one who acted erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to her shooting him. To support this claim, the defense painted a state of mind, alleging that a combination of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines, played a significant role in his behavior. To strengthen their argument, Shauna's attorneys presented the jury with autopsy results that revealed the presence of the aforementioned drugs in Ryan's system. This evidence served to reinforce the notion that his actions were influenced by the substances he was under the influence of. Shauna's attorneys called an expert toxicologist to testify on her behalf. This witness stated that a combination of drugs, like anti-anxiety meds and amphetamines, could potentially cause someone to be violent and paranoid. By presenting this expert testimony, the defense aimed to establish a plausible justification for Shauna's actions, casting doubt on deliberate intent. During Shauna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became increasingly concerned about her chances of acquittal. As a smart, young, pretty woman, they worried her self-defense claim might sway the jury. However, their fears were put to rest on April 23rd, when the jury returned with a guilty verdict, convicting Shauna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shauna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which angered his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shauna maintained her innocence and refused to accept responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, if the judge determines that a defendant was a victim of domestic violence, they may be eligible for reduced parole after serving only 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case did not believe that Shauna was entitled to the reduced parole, saying that she had committed a cold-blooded murder. The judge sentenced Shauna to 40 years in prison, meaning that she will be eligible for parole in 17 years when she is 41 years old in 2032. After Shauna Hubers was sentenced, she appealed for a new trial, which a judge granted in August 2016. The basis for granting the appeal was that one of the jurors had concealed their felony conviction, which violated Kentucky law. Felons are prohibited from serving on juries. In August 2018, after a lengthy delay of 4 months, Shauna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston commenced. Opening arguments were presented by Shauna's defense attorney, who stated that in the year and a half that she dated Ryan, she made every effort to please him. However, their romantic relationship suffered as a result. According to the defense attorney, on the first night that Shauna and Ryan met, he was both sexually and physically violent toward her. This incident had a lasting impact on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages afterward. Shauna's defense attorneys further claimed that when she was in high school, she had been sexually assaulted, leading to a long history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. It was argued that this traumatic experience had contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shauna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shauna's defense team sought to portray her as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They argued that Shauna's actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but rather as a result of years of abuse at the hands of her former partner. One of the key arguments put forth by Shauna's defense attorney was that Ryan had badgered her about her weight and chest size, constantly making negative comments and pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant criticism and pressure, the defense claimed, contributed to Shauna's low self-esteem and contributed to her feelings of inadequacy. The defense also alleged that Ryan and Shauna's sexual relationship had been strained, with frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. It was contended that Ryan's desire for a more romantic and intimate connection was not fulfilled, leading to the growing distance between them. To support their claim, the defense presented evidence that Shauna had received a shot to boost her romantic life. This injection, they said, was sought as a means to address the couple's sexual difficulties and improve their relationship. However, the defense argued that Ryan's constant rejection and disinterest further exacerbated the strain on their relationship, leading Shauna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Ryan would frequently break it off with Shauna and then engage in conversations with other women. During their opening statement, the prosecution informed the jury that they were not aiming to portray Ryan Poston as the perfect boyfriend. However, they maintained that he was not an abusive individual. They argued that Shauna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan. Instead, they alleged that Shauna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship. On the night of the shooting, the prosecution stated that it was finally time for Ryan to break up with Shauna as she refused to leave him alone. Despite the breakup, Shauna always returned, even after Ryan had ended things with her. According to the prosecution, this behavior was evidence of Shauna's inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's work friends testified in court that the breakup between him and Shauna this time would be permanent because Ryan had never broken up with Shauna face-to-face before. He claimed that Shauna had been relentless in her efforts to keep him. During the trial, the prosecution presented text messages from Shauna to her friends in which the woman expressed that the romantic acts she and Ryan had engaged in had brought them closer together. However, Shauna, who testified in her own defense at her second trial, refuted this claim, stating that it had actually driven them apart. In another exchange of text messages, Shauna requested intercourse, but Ryan was taking antidepressants and was not physically driven due to the side effects of the medication. However, when Shauna took the stand, she alleged that Ryan had forced her to engage in sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury once again convicted Shauna of murdering Ryan. Despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence, the jury reached their decision, upholding their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shauna's mother addressed the judge, sharing an emotional story about her daughter's singing talent and its role in securing multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she pleaded for the jury to consider granting parole to Shauna, asserting that she still had the opportunity to impact people's lives positively. However, she made it clear that her pleas did not diminish the grief and pain being experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Ultimately, Shauna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to sentencing terms, Shauna will be required to serve at least 17 years before she can be considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Story 5. Tom Clayton played for the United Hockey League, 2 steps below the NHL, for the Elmira, New York Jackals. Because of his role on the Jackals, Tom was a local celebrity in Elmira. He was known as an agitator, someone who antagonized players by verbal or physical incitement. On the rink, Tom was aggressive and confident, and carried that attitude into real life. Just like in his hockey games, he had no problem standing up for himself and protecting his interests. Tom's reputation as a tough player on the ice extended to his personal life, and people knew he wouldn't be easily intimidated. In addition to his aggressive nature, Tom was known for his good looks. Women couldn't help but notice him, and Tom took advantage of his charm. Whenever Tom went out, he never had to pay for a drink or dinner. He was living the high life, enjoying the perks that came with being a popular hockey player. While there were numerous random women in and out of Tom's life, one in particular caught his attention. Her name was Kelly Stage, and she was different from many other women Tom encountered. Kelly was born in West Elmira and was known for her outgoing and sassy personality. Her love for country music led her to travel to Nashville, where she immersed herself in the vibrant music scene. While attending college with the aspirations of becoming a teacher after graduation, Kelly's plans took an unexpected turn. She decided to move to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she embarked on a new journey as a cocktail server and a model. During one Christmas holiday while back home to celebrate with her family, Kelly attended a hockey game in Elmira. It was there that she met Tom Clayton. Tom caught her attention with his looks and skillful movements on the ice. After the game, Kelly and Tom unexpectedly crossed paths at a bar. Their initial encounter led to an instant connection, and the spark between them was undeniable. Despite some reservations from Kelly's friends and family, who occasionally found Tom's behavior inappropriate, Kelly remained firmly committed to their relationship. She defended Tom, claiming he was kidding when he made his remarks, blinded by her love for him. Eventually, Kelly and Tom married, but unfortunately, 1 year later, Tom was injured while playing hockey, ending his career. After Tom retired from hockey, he began working a 9-to-5 with ServPro, a company that helped clean up large messes after disasters. Tom's job provided him with a stable income and allowed him to provide for his family. Meanwhile, Kelly dedicated herself to caring for Tom and their 2 children, Charlie and Cullen. She loved being a mother more than anything in the world. Kelly went above and beyond to provide the best for her children and create a loving and nurturing home for them. To the outside world, the Claytons appeared to be the perfect family. Tom and Kelly seemed to have it all, with a thriving marriage and 2 children. They lived in a secluded mountain home that Kelly adored. However, in September of 2015, their lives were forever changed. A tragic event would shake the foundation of their seemingly idyllic existence. On the night of September 29, 2015, Tom Clayton headed out after work to play poker at his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house, leaving Kelly home alone with the children. When Tom arrived home from the poker game, he made a horrific discovery. His wife, Kelly, lay lifeless on the kitchen floor, covered in blood. Panic-stricken, Tom immediately called 911. The dispatcher instructed Tom to perform CPR on his wife, but Tom, devastated, informed the dispatcher that Kelly was beyond any help. Around midnight, an officer arrived at Tom and Kelly Clayton's house. Upon entering the residence, the officer was taken aback by the scene that awaited him. In the kitchen, he found Kelly lying lifeless on the floor. Her face was disfigured, evident of blunt force trauma. Blood was spattered everywhere, creating a chilling sight. The officer's initial reaction was to secure Tom Clayton and remove him from the house. Once outside, the officer approached Tom and asked him what had happened. Tom replied that he was unsure of the exact details. He stated that he had returned home to find his wife in this condition, and his daughter, Charlie, had informed him that there was a robber in the house. Being cautious, the officer examined Tom's hands for signs of a struggle or evidence suggesting that Tom played a role in the attack. However, the officer observed nothing out of the ordinary. Prompted by the severity of the situation, the officer called for backup. A paramedic arrived at the scene and declared Kelly Clayton deceased. The brutal nature of her death prompted the police department to launch an all-hands-on-deck investigation. As police officers cordoned off Tom and Kelly's home as a crime scene, Tom made a phone call to Kelly's sister, Kim, and delivered the heartbreaking news that Kelly had passed away. In shock, Kim rushed to the scene along with their mother, Liz. Upon arrival, they were greeted by crime scene tape and flashing lights from patrol cars. The sight only intensified their fear and anxiety. Determined to locate Kelly, Kim and Liz ran towards the ambulance, hoping they would find paramedics working to save her. However, the officers on the scene refused to allow them to get too close. Despite their desperation, they were told that they could not view Kelly, as Kelly did not look like she did in life. The news that Kelly had been killed and her body was now unrecognizable shattered Kim and Liz's hearts. They broke down, their sobs filling the air as they screamed in anguish. As the scene unfolded, a coroner van arrived. With a heavy heart, Kim, Liz, and the officers presented joined hands to pray for Kelly's soul as her body was transported into the van in a body bag. As the night progressed and the crime scene investigators meticulously searched through Kelly and Tom's house and property, their efforts yielded no new evidence pointing towards a suspect. They diligently combed through each room, but to no avail. The investigators could not locate a murder weapon at the scene, but based on Kelly's injuries, they determined it was a light object. The investigators determined that the attack on Kelly took place while she was sleeping peacefully in the master bedroom on the second floor. it was evident that the attacker had struck her with a blunt object. Following the attack on Kelly, it is believed she attempted to make a run for safety and sought refuge in Charlie's bedroom. There was a significant amount of blood discovered in that bedroom, leading investigators to believe that Kelly had barricaded herself inside. However, evidence suggested that the attack continued as there was a hole in the landing wall that appeared to be caused by Kelly's body being pushed down the stairs. Upon getting up after the fall down the stairs, Kelly made her way to the kitchen, where the suspect eventually caught up to her. In a violent encounter, the suspect bludgeoned Kelly in the head and face, inflicting severe injuries that resulted in her death. Even though Tom Clayton told the first officer on the scene that his daughter Charlie had said a robber had been in the house, the investigators who searched the home found no indication of forced entry, and nothing was missing. Moreover, all of the expensive jewelry belonging to Kelly was still present and untouched, and the safe was intact. Due to the brutality of Kelly's death, the detective began to wonder if it was the result of a domestic violent dispute. However, Tom Clayton claimed to have an alibi, stating that he was playing poker at his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house the entire night. If true, this would have made it impossible for him to murder Kelly. When an officer questioned Tom and Kelly's neighbor at the crime scene, the neighbor stated that he did not believe the couple had any issues and appeared happy. At the police station, detectives interviewed Tom Clayton regarding his wife's murder. Tom reiterated his alibi that he was playing poker the night in question. The detectives then decided to question the other players Tom mentioned being at Greg and Linda Miller's house that evening. All the players confirmed that Tom was present. Although Tom had a solid alibi for his wife's murder, the detectives found him to be strangely calm considering the situation. They asked him several times if he had anything to do with Kelly's murder, and Tom denied it every single time. Unfortunately, Tom and Kelly's 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, witnessed the entire assault on her mother, Kelly, and the detectives needed to question her. The detectives, recognizing the importance of protecting Charlie's well-being, decided to take a different approach when asking her about her mother's murder. Rather than immediately delving into the details of the incident, they took the time to make her feel comfortable. They engaged in lighthearted activities, such as playing board games with her, before the serious discussion began. When the detectives finally approached the topic of the murder, they asked Charlie to describe what she had seen that night. According to Charlie, a robber had entered the house dressed in a mask, a long-sleeved black shirt, and jeans. The intruder had a white stick that resembled a metal pipe, and it was with this weapon that they assaulted Kelly. Charlie recalled that she heard Kelly yell, "Run, Charlie, run," as the assailant pushed her down the stairs. Charlie recounted that after Kelly was pushed down the stairs by the intruder, she followed and witnessed this person beat Kelly to death on the kitchen floor. She stated that she thought her mother was dead on the floor, so she lay next to her and hugged her leg. Throughout the interview, 7-year-old Charlie appeared detached from the situation. According to Charlie, the robber who hurt her mommy had the same eyes as her daddy. However, little Charlie told the detectives her dad couldn't have hurt her mommy, because then who would take care of them? Based on all the evidence recovered from the crime scene and Charlie's statements, the detectives thought the intruder's goal was not to rob the house, but to murder Kelly. After the detectives questioned Tom Clayton, they charged him with second-degree murder in regard to his wife Kelly's death, based on his daughter's description of the intruder looking like him. Tom pleaded not guilty to the second-degree murder charge. He was released on bail and returned to the home where Kelly was murdered. He cleaned it up and continued to live there. Within 1 month after Kelly's murder, Tom began having sexual relations with various women, gambling in Atlantic City, and did not appear to be grieving. These actions raised suspicions among the detectives, who believed that Tom's actions were not those of a loving husband mourning the loss of his wife. However, Tom continued to profess his love for Kelly and said he would never hurt her. He was planning on taking her away for a second honeymoon. Tom was insistent that the detectives check his GPS records on his work truck, which indicated that he did not arrive home until 12:35 a.m. Despite verifying the time Tom came home through his vehicle's GPS, the detectives remained convinced that he was somehow involved in Kelly's murder. During the investigation, the detectives spoke to Greg and Linda Miller, whose house Tom was at playing poker. They mentioned that something seemed off about Tom on the night of the murder. According to Greg and Linda, Tom, normally happy and talkative, was quieter than usual and spent most of the night texting on his cell phone. However, they did not believe Tom was capable of harming his wife, Kelly. The detectives also spoke to Kim, Kelly's sister, as part of their investigation. They asked her if she knew of anyone who would want to hurt Kelly. Kim mentioned the name Michael Beard. Michael Beard was a close friend and co-worker of Tom Clayton, functioning as a right-hand man. Whenever Tom needed anything done, he would rely on Michael. Tom Clayton and Michael Beard's close relationship extended beyond their professional endeavors, as Michael also knew Tom's wife and children. There were instances when Kelly needed to run errands, and Michael would step in and sit with Charlie and Colin while their mother was gone. Michael had high praise for Kelly and the children, describing them as beautiful people. In addition to being employed by Tom, Michael was also his landlord, as Tom owned the building where Michael and his family resided. They paid a monthly rental fee of $1,000. However, things took a turn for the worse when Michael was accused of drinking while working. As a result, Tom made the decision to fire him. This incident not only resulted in the loss of his job, but also created a financial burden for Michael, as he was already behind on the rent owed to Tom. Tom's decision to terminate Michael's employment not only affected his employment status, but also put his tenancy in jeopardy. Tom initiated eviction proceedings against Michael, further exacerbating his financial struggles. Michael found himself caught in a difficult position, facing both the loss of his job and the fear of losing his home. The detectives brought Michael Beard to the police station for an interview, with the intent of gathering information regarding Kelly's murder. During the interview, Michael stated that it was a tragedy that Kelly was killed, but claimed that he was at home the entire night. In the meantime, Linda Miller, where Tom had played poker on the night of Kelly's murder, recalled a specific memory that stood out. Tom had asked to use her cell phone, even though his phone appeared to be working fine at the time. According to Linda, Tom made the call at 10:53 p.m. Upon further investigation, Linda discovered that the number and details of the call had disappeared from her phone's records. It appeared that Tom had intentionally deleted the number he called. The detectives gained access to Greg and Linda Miller's cell phone records, which provided them with the phone number Tom had called on the night of the murder. After tracing the phone number, the detectives discovered it belonged to Michael Beard. Once the detectives learned Tom Clayton had called Michael Beard on the night of his wife's murder, they brought Michael back to the police department for an interview. However, Michael continued to deny the involvement in Kelly's murder. The detectives then decided to question Michael's partner, Holly. According to Holly, Michael was not home all night on the night of the murder and left the house around 11 p.m. Furthermore, Holly stated that Tom Clayton once approached Michael and asked him to burn down his and Kelly's house for $10,000, with the intention of collecting the insurance money. When Michael was confronted with this information, he decided to make a full confession to murdering Kelly. Michael confessed to murdering Tom's wife, Kelly, in exchange for a payment of $10,000. He claimed that he had agreed to kill the woman but never received any money from Tom. In a signed confession, Michael Beard laid out the entire plan, according to which he was supposed to go to Tom's house and murder his wife, Kelly, while the children were out at their grandmother's house. Tom instructed Michael to use the gas cans in the garage to burn the house down so that he could collect the insurance payouts for the damaged house and vehicles. However, Michael claimed that he never set the fire. Instead, he fled from the scene after murdering Kelly. Michael took the police and led them to the murder weapon, which was described as a sledgehammer-type object. When tested, it was found to contain Kelly's DNA. Additionally, Michael led them to an area where he had disposed of his bloody clothing items. Mark Blanford, a friend of Michael Beard's, contacted the detectives and provided a statement regarding his encounter with Michael on the night of the murder. He said Michael asked him to assist in a job and would pay him $500. However, Mark claimed he had no idea what job Michael was doing and assumed it was some sort of drug deal. According to Mark, Michael told him he had to kill a bitch, and Mark alleges that after Michael returned to the car, he mentioned that the children were not supposed to be at home. Michael Beard was subsequently arrested and charged with first-degree murder in relation to Kelly Clayton's death. Detectives believe that 7-year-old Charlie did not see her father during the attack, but rather mistook the attacker for her father due to the way he was dressed. Tom, Kelly's husband, had a substantial life insurance policy on Kelly that was recently increased before her murder. The detectives believe that this may have been the motive behind the murder, as Kelly would likely receive a significant portion of Tom's assets in the event of a divorce. Furthermore, the detectives believe that Tom Clayton not only intended to kill his wife, but also wanted his children murdered. Michael Beard supports this claim. He alleged that Tom Clayton confided in him the details of the planned murders. According to Michael, Tom Clayton informed him that the children would be staying at their grandmother's house and instructed him to set fire to the house after murdering Kelly. However, when he instructed Michael to set the fire, Tom Clayton knew his children would be at home and not at their grandmother's house. This information suggested a deliberate plan by Tom Clayton to ensure his children's demise as well. It implied that Tom wanted to eliminate any reminders of his former life with Kelly and start over as a child-free single bachelor. From the evidence gathered by the detectives, it appears that Tom Clayton's actions were driven by a desire to erase his past and start anew. Before Michael Beard's trial began, he recanted his confession and stated that he did not murder Kelly, but instead walked into the Clayton home to find her on the ground covered in blood. Michael claimed that, as a black man in the house with a murdered white woman, he was afraid of how it would look and did not want the murder pinned on him. As a result, he fled the scene without contacting 911. Michael Beard claimed his signed confessions were coerced, but in 2016 he was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. In an interview with 20 to 20, Michael changed his story again and stated that he arrived at the Clayton home on the night Kelly was killed and saw a man running from the scene. He claimed this man ran into him, nearly knocking him down. However, Michael's revised statement raised several questions. If this information was true, why didn't he bring this up at the start of the investigation? Mark Blanford pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree manslaughter for acting as the lookout while Michael Beard murdered Kelly Clayton. The plea was part of a deal where Mark promised to testify against Tom Clayton. Although Mark had an extensive criminal record spanning over 30 years, he had never faced charges as serious as this one. At his sentencing hearing, Mark expressed remorse to Kelly's family and friends, apologizing for the role he played in her murder. During Michael's trial for his wife Kelly's murder, the state presented various women who claimed that they had been in relationships with Tom while he was married to Kelly. One of the women testified that Tom often spoke badly about his wife, calling her lazy. However, when Tom's defense team had the opportunity to counter the state's claims, they argued that having extramarital affairs did not automatically make him a murderer. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury found Tom guilty of second-degree murder. Today, Tom's children are thriving in the care of their Aunt Kim, Kelly's sister. The children have a strong support system, allowing them to continue their lives without their mother. To honor Kelly's memory, a park was built in a playground where she used to take her children to play. Her son even calls it Mommy's Bench. Story 6. On March 19, 2024, Keith Smiley returned home from work, unaware that a chilling confrontation awaited him. Moments after entering the house, a gunshot rang out as his 15-year-old stepdaughter, Carly, lay in wait. Hit by a bullet in the neck, Heath barely escaped with his life. In a 911 call, he reported, "I think my wife has been shot. I just got home and there is blood everywhere." With urgency in his voice, he detailed the chaos surrounding him and informed the dispatcher that Carly had fled the scene, leading law enforcement into a rapidly escalating crisis. What could drive a teenager to such a horrific act? Despite what should have been clear-cut evidence, surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and confessions, this case only proved one thing. Things were not as they seemed. Proving what truly happened that day and why would be a nearly impossible task. Hi, I'm Mark, and welcome to True Crime Stories. Today we're looking at a case that left a small Mississippi town in disbelief and had law enforcement and the courts searching for answers. The investigation into Carly Gregg's actions revealed family secrets, mental health issues, and an unexpected twist. This is the story of the Carly Gregg case. Let's dive in. The day began like any other for Carly and Ashley. Carly, an exceptional student who had skipped a grade, was known for her intelligence, but had recently shown signs of distress. She was undergoing therapy for anxiety and stress, largely stemming from her tumultuous relationship with her biological father, Kevin Gregg, who struggled with drug addiction. Meanwhile, Ashley, a dedicated algebra teacher from Northwest Rankin High School and a beloved figure in the community, was focused on her teaching career and her family life. At school that day, Carly interacted with friends and teachers, but kept her struggles hidden. Despite her outwardly normal behavior, she was secretly dealing with significant issues, including conflicts with her mother over drug use. Ashley had recently discovered that Carly was using marijuana through vape pens, which added tension to their relationship. Carly and Ashley arrived at their residence shortly after 4 p.m. Ashley had received information regarding Carly's alleged marijuana use through vape pens, which prompted her to confront Carly upon returning home. As soon as they entered the house, Ashley proceeded to Carly's bedroom to search for evidence of drug use. At this point, only the two were present in the home. Home surveillance footage captured Carly holding an object behind her back as she approached her mother. The nature of this object would soon become critical to the investigation. Ashley had kept a loaded firearm in the house for protection due to concerns about Carly's biological father, Kevin Gregg, who had a history of drug addiction. Carly had retrieved the same firearm located underneath the bedside where Ashley slept. Seconds after the confrontation began, Ashley was shot by Carly 3 times. After shooting her mother point-blank, Carly sent a frantic text message to her friend, asking to come over and help with an emergency. This call for assistance indicated Carly's immediate need for support for shooting. Upon receiving the message, the friend quickly made her way to Carly's home. When Carly's friend arrived at the front door, she was greeted with a chilling question. "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" This statement set a grim tone as Carly led her friend into the bedroom where Ashley lay on the floor. Carly then allegedly revealed, "I put 3 in my mom and I have 3 more for my stepdad when he gets home." After showing her friend the scene, Carly reportedly took down an interior camera from its mount and placed it in the refrigerator. This action suggested an attempt to tamper with evidence and indicated a level of premeditation regarding her actions. Prior to leaving the office, Heath Smiley, who was Carly's stepfather, had received a text from Ashley's phone asking when he would be returning home from work. He replied he would be working a little late. Heath arrived home at approximately 5:03 p.m. He initially perceived nothing unusual as he entered the house. However, as he opened the kitchen door, a gunshot rang out as he stepped onto the threshold. Carly was waiting to pounce, but fortunately for Heath, she could not get a good enough shot. Heath was grazed by a bullet in the neck area during this encounter. He subsequently attempted to follow Carly as she fled outside. Heath Smiley placed a frantic 911 call shortly after being shot by his own stepdaughter. In the call, he reported, "I think my wife has been shot. I just got home and there is blood everywhere." His voice was urgent as he provided details about the situation. He described being shot in the neck and indicated that Carly had fled the scene. Heath stated, "She shot me in the head," and informed the dispatcher that Carly had a firearm, which he believed was left on the kitchen counter. He provided a description of Carly and her direction of flight, saying she ran towards Magnolia Place. This information was critical for law enforcement as they began the response. Deputies from the Rankin County Sheriff's Office arrived on the scene within minutes of the 911 call. Upon arrival, they found Heath outside the front door, visibly injured and in need of medical attention. Officers quickly assessed his condition and called for medical assistance while securing the area. As deputies entered the home, they discovered Ashley lying on the floor of her bedroom. The scene was chaotic. Evidence of a violent confrontation was immediately apparent. The deputies noted multiple gunshot wounds on Ashley's body, confirming that she had been shot at close range. This discovery marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The initial assessment by law enforcement included securing the crime scene and gathering evidence. They noted the position of Ashley's body and collected any potential ballistics evidence from both inside and outside the home. The deputies also examined surveillance footage from both inside and outside the residence to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the shooting. Heath provided a detailed account of what he had encountered when he returned home, which would later serve as crucial testimony in court. His statements about Carly's actions immediately before and after the shooting were vital for understanding her state of mind. As part of their investigation, deputies also began a search for Carly, utilizing outdoor surveillance footage to track her movements after she fled. A Mississippi Highway Patrol helicopter was deployed to assist in locating her. Carly was apprehended approximately 30 minutes after the shooting without further incident. She was taken into custody and charged with multiple offenses, including murder and attempted murder, based on evidence gathered at the scene and Heath's statements. The swift response by law enforcement and their methodical approach to gathering evidence laid the groundwork for what would become a complex legal case involving serious charges against Carly Gregg. After the shooting incident from March 19, 2024, Carly Gregg was taken into custody shortly after law enforcement arrived at the scene. She was held at Rankin County Jail in Brandon, Mississippi, where she remained pending trial. Carly was charged as an adult with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. Her bond was set at $1 million, the significant amount reflecting the severity of the charges. Throughout this period, Carly remained in custody, awaiting the legal proceedings that would follow. During her time in custody, Carly's legal team began to prepare for her defense. The prosecution's case was based on the evidence collected at the scene, including eyewitness accounts and forensic analysis. Carly pleaded not guilty to all charges, maintaining her innocence as the case progressed. Carly also underwent several mental health evaluations to assess her psychological state. These evaluations were crucial in understanding her behavior leading up to the incident. Discussions around her history of anxiety in previous therapy sessions were significant as they became central to the defense's argument. In the months following her arrest, Carly was offered a plea deal that would result in a 40-year prison sentence. However, she rejected this device through her defense team, opting to go to trial instead. This decision indicated her desire to contest the charges against her fully. As the trial date approached, Carly's legal team focused on gathering evidence and witness testimonies. They sought to build a comprehensive defense that would address both the factual elements of the case and Carly's mental health issues. This preparation involved reviewing surveillance footage, analyzing text messages, and consulting with mental health experts. What would you do if you found yourself in the same situation as the defense team? The complexities of such a case often raise challenging questions about accountability and mental health. The case of Carly Gregg took a dramatic turn on August 19 when the defense attorneys faced scrutiny from the prestigious judge. While Carly had been deemed competent to stand trial, questions rose about her mental state at the time of the alleged crime. In a courtroom drama that received national attention, Judge Dewey Arthur questioned the defense's tactics regarding a crucial mental health evaluation report. The judge expressed concern about the report's delayed submission, suggesting it might have been a strategic maneuver to gain an advantage on the trial. The defense attorneys, Bridget Todd and Kevin Camp, maintained the delay was unintentional. They emphasized the complexity of obtaining the report and assured the court that they would share it with the prosecution as soon as it was finalized. Judge Arthur, however, remained skeptical. He warned that withholding the report could be seen as a deliberate attempt to manipulate the trial proceedings. He stressed the importance of transparency and fairness in the legal process. As the case progressed, the focus shifted on the mental health evaluations conducted on Carly. Dr. Amanda Gugliano, the psychologist who assessed Carly's competency, testified that medication changes in the months leading up to the incident could have influenced her mental state. However, Dr. Gugliano acknowledged her expertise did not extend to the potential side effects or impact of these medications. The defense team, recognizing the limitations of Dr. Gugliano's evaluation, contracted another doctor, Dr. Mark Webb, to conduct a comprehensive mental health assessment. The defense intended to present Dr. Webb's finding as evidence in court. The case of Carly Gregg continued as the date of the trial approached. On September 10th, 6 days before the trial, a motion was put forward in front of the judge by the defense in an attempt to exclude a crucial piece of evidence, a urine test administered upon her admission to the detention center. The defense argued that the test was conducted without proper authorization and should be deemed inadmissible. Prosecutors countered that this very test was necessary for safety purposes and that Gregg had voluntarily admitted to using marijuana. They argued that the evidence of marijuana use was relevant to Gregg's potential mental state at the time of the crime. Judge Dewey Arthur, after careful consideration, ruled in favor of the prosecution, denying the defense's motion to surpass the drug test. The judge found the search to be reasonable based on the circumstances and the potential risks involved. In a separate development, the judge issued a gag order prohibiting Gregg's attorneys from speaking to the media about the case. This decision came in response to the allegations that the defense had violated procedural rules by commenting on the facts of the case. The first day of the Carly Gregg murder trial unfolded in a somber courtroom atmosphere. Prosecution presented evidence, including a 911 call recording and body cam footage of the day of the shooting. Carly Gregg, now 15, was accused of murdering her mother, Ashley Smiley, and attempting to murder her stepfather, Heath Smiley, on March 9th. The trial began with the testimony of Rankin County dispatcher Kevin Collins, who played the 911 call made by Heath Smiley. In the recording, Heath could be heard sounding hysterical and frantic, describing the shooting and the tragic discovery of his wife's body. The prosecution then presented body cam footage from Rankin County Patrol Deputy Hunter Lewis, who arrived at the scene. The footage captured the chaos of the situation as Heath Smiley, visibly distraught, informed the deputy of the shooting and the location of his deceased wife. The jury watched as the body cam footage revealed the tragic scene inside the home, where Ashley Smiley lay lifeless. The footage provided a stark visual of the aftermath of the crime. During opening statements, the prosecution painted a picture of Carly Gregg's secret life, including her relationship with a boyfriend, her use of social media, and her self-harm. They alleged that on the day of the shooting, Carly had an altercation with a friend at school, and that her mother had discovered her vape pens in her bedroom. The prosecution argued that Carly had shot her mother with a .357 Magnum gun, and she was concealing behind her back. They presented evidence supporting their claims, including ballistic evidence and gunshot residue found on Carly's hands. The defense, however, painted a different perspective. They argued that Carly loved her mother and was a good student. They suggested that Carly might have been terrified and confused when her stepfather returned home, leading to the tragic events. The trial continued with the aim of uncovering the truth behind the tragic murder of Ashley Smiley. As the evidence unfolded, the jury faced the difficult task of determining Carly Gregg's guilt or innocence. What would you do if you were a juror in this case? How would you weigh the evidence and determine Carly's fate? The second day of the Carly Gregg murder trial delved deeper into the events surrounding the tragic incident. Heath Smiley, Carly's stepfather, took the stand to provide his account of the day. Heath described his positive relationship with Carly and his admiration for Ashley as a mother. He recounted the morning of the shooting as normal, with no apparent signs of distress from Carly. Heath detailed the moments leading up to the shooting, including receiving a text message from Ashley and arriving home. He described the chaos of the situation when he opened the door and was confronted with the gun. Heath recounted the struggle to disarm Carly and the subsequent gunshots. He described Carly as appearing scared and hysterical after the shooting. Heath also testified to searching the house for an intruder, but found none. Friends of Carly testified about her character and changes in her behavior. They described her as a good girl with no history of violence, but noticed increasing drug use and concerning statements about harming her parents. One friend, BW, recounted the conversation with Carly after the shooting. She was the friend who came over when Carly had asked for help after shooting her mother. BW also told the court that Carly had allegedly admitted to shooting her mother and expressed a desire to harm her stepfather. BW also testified hearing gunshots after she ran into the backyard, traumatized by Carly's confession of killing her own mother. The trial also explored Carly's relationship with her biological father, Kevin Gregg. Heath testified that Kevin had a history of drug use and that his presence in Carly's life had caused concern. He mentioned specific instances where Kevin's behavior had negatively impacted Carly, like forcing her to drink at such a young age. The defense used the biological father as a means to divert the attention from the murders being a deliberate act and instead a haphazard mishap due to Carly's volatile mental health. Defense also continued to present their case, emphasizing Carly's mental health issues and her love of her mother. They argued that the tragic events were a result of her mental state rather than a deliberate act of violence. The third day of the Carly Gregg murder trial delved deeper into the complexities of the case. The defense presented a comprehensive picture of Carly's mental health history, drawing from medical records, school records, journal entries, and a sketchbook. Dr. Andrew Clark, a renowned child and adolescent psychiatrist, testified as an expert witness as part of the defense's witnesses. He diagnosed Carly with bipolar II disorder, a condition characterized by fluctuating moods and periods of mania or depression. Dr. Clark presented detailed evidence from Carly's medical records, highlighting her long-standing struggles with depression and anxiety. He discussed specific incidents of self-harm and concerning behavior that dated back several years. The analysis of Carly's journal entries and sketchbook revealed a darker side of her mental state. Dr. Clark read aloud excerpts that expressed feelings of despair, hopelessness, and aggression. The entries provided insights into Carly's inner turmoil and potential struggles with intrusive thoughts. The defense argued that Carly's mental health issues, combined with the stressors in her life, created a perfect storm that led to her violent actions. They emphasized her difficult childhood, including the loss of a sister and her parents' divorce. The prosecution, however, challenged Dr. Andrew Clark's assessment. They questioned the reliability of Carly's self-reported symptoms and argued that she was capable of understanding the difference between right and wrong at the time of the crimes. Carly's relationship with her biological father was once again at hand on the third day, too. Keith Smiley, Carly's stepfather, had previously testified about Kevin's history of drug use and its negative impact on Carly. The defense presented evidence suggesting that Carly's relationship with Kevin was strained and she experienced emotional trauma as a result of his behavior. This information further supported the argument that Carly's mental health was influenced by her family dynamics. As the trial progressed, the jury faced the complex task of weighing the evidence and determining Carly Gregg's guilt or innocence. Nonetheless, the details provided on the third day provided a more comprehensive understanding of Carly's mental health struggles and the potential impact they had on her actions. The fourth day of the Carly Gregg murder trial featured testimonies from rebuttal witnesses called by the state. These witnesses aimed to counter the defense's expert testimony regarding Carly's mental state. First up was Olivia Labor, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She first met with Carly in January 2024, conducting a comprehensive evaluation. She testified that during her initial assessment and throughout the sessions she had with Carly, Carly explicitly denied hearing voices. It was also Labor who had prescribed medication changes to address Carly's depression and anxiety. As per Labor's testimony, despite the medication changes, Carly did not report any hallucinations or delusions during subsequent sessions. The next witness to come in front of the jury was Rebecca Kirk, a licensed professional counselor. She had met with Carly for counseling on 9 different occasions prior to the tragic events of the 19th of March. She testified that throughout their sessions, Carly did not express any suicidal or homicidal tendencies or thoughts. She also emphasized that depression and anxiety were common among her clients, suggesting that Carly's symptoms were not unusual. Last to testify against the jury on the fourth day was Dr. Jason Pickett, a forensic psychiatrist. He had been in charge of assessing Carly's mental state against the legal criteria for insanity in Mississippi. He analyzed various types of evidence, including Carly's journal entries, statements, and circumstances surrounding the case. Based on his analysis, Dr. Pickett told the court that Carly understood the nature and wrongfulness of her actions at the time of the incident. Another analysis of Dr. Pickett, which he incurred after analyzing both Carly's writings and statements, was that some of them were theatrical and others were concerning. It was Dr. Pickett who further emphasized in front of the court that the low dosage of Lexapro, which Carly had been switched to recently, could not be the reason for Carly Gregg to commit those alleged atrocities she did on the fateful day of March 19, 2024. Hence, the state's expert witnesses provided accounts that differed significantly from the testimonies of the defense's expert, Dr. Andrew Clark. Dr. Clark had previously testified that Carly was experiencing a mental health crisis at the time of the shooting. He cited her struggles with mood swings, eating disorders, self-harm, and hearing voices as evidence of her deteriorating mental state. The morning of the fifth day of Carly Grigg's murder trial marked a significant moment in the case. The jury, having deliberated throughout the previous day, was set to deliver their verdict. As the courtroom fell silent, the judge announced the jury's decision. In a solemn tone, he declared Carly Grigg guilty of all 3 charges: murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. Following the verdict, the jury turned their attention to the sentencing phase of the trial. They would now determine the appropriate punishment for Carly Grigg based on the evidence presented and the severity of her crimes. The judge, considering the severity of the crimes and the evidence presented, sentenced Carly Grigg to life in prison without parole for the murder of her mother and attempted murder of her stepfather. Additionally, Grigg was sentenced to 10 years in prison for tampering with evidence. However, the judge ruled that that sentence would run concurrently, meaning that Carly Grigg would serve a total to life in prison. The courtroom was filled with emotions as the sentence was announced. Carly Grigg, overcome with grief and despair, broke down in tears. Her family members, including Keith Smiley, Ashley Smiley's parents, and other relatives, also expressed their emotions. Before the jury could deliver their final verdict on the sentencing, the prosecution and defense presented their final arguments. Prosecutor Catherine Newman argued that Carly Grigg showed no remorse for her actions. Newman also emphasized that Carly understood the nature and consequences of her actions. She also presented evidence to support the claim that Grigg acted with premeditation and intent. On the other hand, the defense attorneys, Bridget Todd and Kevin Camp, pleaded for leniency, highlighting Grigg's mental health struggles. They also emphasized Grigg's love for her mother and her positive relationship with her stepfather. They also argued that Carly's actions were influenced by her mental health issues and that she may not have fully understand the consequences of her actions. The jury, composed of diverse members, deliberated for 2 long hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Carly Grigg was found guilty on all 3 charges: murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. Carly Grigg was sentenced to life in prison without parole for killing her mother, attempting to kill her stepfather, and tampering with evidence. Both judge and jury were on the same page as they found her guilty of all 3 offenses and agreed upon the decided sentence. The judge did not show a slight bit of leniency, and he added the 10 concurrent years for evidence tampering. As for Carly, she's not done yet. Just a couple of weeks after the outcome of the initial trial, she's already seeking a new trial. Should she have taken the 40 years offered as a plea, or did she do the right thing to go through the trial? As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.